So throughout our day today, we'll be discussing how the 1619 project can lead to meaningful impact. I tried to share some of the impact that we've seen so far, and we'll be continuing to share from our network program. We'll be talking about how folks have built empathy and solidarity in learning spaces. And we'll also see the ways that multiple iterations of this project have inspired audiences to engage with history in new ways and to develop their educational and artistic works engaging with similar themes. We're going to start that work by having the opportunity to engage in a learning workshop about the role of archival research in preserving history with the photo curator of the 1619 Project book anthology, Kimberly Annece Henderson. Kimberly is a historical researcher, curator, and author based in New York City. Her work centers genealogy and Black American lineages through archival photography and historical preservation, as seen in her Instagram project at Emmeline and Them. She currently facilitates digital projects for the New York Public Library's Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem, and her curatorial work is featured in the 1619 Project book, A New Origin Story. In March 2023, Penguin Random House published her first lyrical picture book entitled Dear Yesteryear, which is very great. I recommend getting it for your students in classrooms. And we're just so grateful for you being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Should I just jump right in?
Yes, let me make sure you have the screen sharing opportunities. Okay, there you go. That should work.
Okay. Okay, great. So can everyone hear me okay? Let's see. I'm trying to make sure I still can see the chat because that will, yes, okay, great. All right, okay, great. So everyone, hi, my name is Kimberly Annece Henderson. I am the digital curator at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. I'm an author of Dear Yesteryear, a picture book. It's 43 archival photographs of everyday Black Americans from the late 1800s and early 1900s, paired with an open letter that I've written to the ancestors. I am the photography curator of the 1619 Project book and the creator and curator of Emmeline and Them, which is a Instagram-based archival photography project that I will be sharing more about shortly. So let's get started. Let's see. Okay, so I will start this panel by discussing how I arrived at the use of archival photography in my work, and then transition into how I got involved with the 1619 project. And then from there, we'll have sort of this call and response, looking at archival photography, and there will be a very like participatory element. So be ready for that sort of towards the end. But I wanted to start by sharing how I arrived at my obsession with archival photography. So I started several years ago, I started researching my family history. And I wanted to start with my my maternal side, so my mother's line, because of a lot of questions that I had about our family history. And bits and pieces of stories that she's told me, and just the questions that came out of that, lifelong questions that I was curious about with her identity and her ancestors' identity. So I started by asking her what she knew that could help me research. And she gave me these 3 items of information. So Ruth Ann Martin is the name of my grandmother. Her father's name is Cuther Martin, and then the known location of their where their family is from. So that's Burlington, North Carolina. So I started with these 3 items of information, and I started by using Ancestry.com, which, if you're unfamiliar, it's just a family tree building interface that also hosts a database of vital records, so death certificates, birth certificates, marriage licenses, all kinds of records are housed in this ancestry.com platform. So that's where I started. And after several years of researching, I ended up with a wealth of information about my maternal ancestors. I actually ended up partnering with or reaching out to a relative, a distant cousin of mine. We share the same, my fourth great grandfather is, I think, her second great grandfather. So she actually had done all this research and was able to share family photographs. So that's what you're seeing here. The woman in the center here, her name is Harriet Jeffries. That is my fourth great grandmother. This is her daughter, two of her daughters, Hetty Martin and Martha Martin. And then here, this gentleman in the gray photo here, that was her husband. His name is Samuel F. Martin. And these are photos of two of their sons, or excuse me, one of their sons, Joe Martin, and then his son, Exodus Martin, who is my second great grandfather. So I won't bore you with all the details of my family history, but I will share that as soon as I saw these photographs, I was struck by the resemblance to these ancestors to my mother and even myself in some ways. And also it just really opened up my world and just my understanding of my mom's side of the family. And that's one point that I want to stress throughout this workshop is the visual history, having these archival photographs to reference, and, these ideas of representation and seeing yourself in the past and how important that is. So as soon as I connected with this, this family member, distant cousin of mine, and had these photos, I just, it seemed like my research blossomed, and I was able to find out that my fourth great grandfather actually founded a church. So it's Martin's Chapel in Burlington, North Carolina. And who knew I had an ancestral church? So I visited the church in 2019, excuse me, and it was actually the year of their centennial celebration. So they put together this really beautiful yearbook that features a lot of these photographs and other information about them. They were very religious people. Here in the background of this sort of collage slide here, you'll see some headstones photos that I took while I visited. And from there, I started to piece together more of the context of their lives. So they're actually featured in textbooks. They're featured in 4 textbooks about the history of North Carolina. And that's those are the thumbnail images you're seeing here. And I decided to share this side-by-side view of my mother, who is pictured on the right. And on the left is my fourth great grandmother, Harriet Jeffries. So you can really see the resemblance there and how uncanny it was to find these photographs. So I found in all of this, summarizing all of my research, I found that my mother's ancestors were in its heyday, they were a part of a community called Little Texas in the Piedmont of North Carolina. It was the Pleasant Grove Township in Alamance County, North Carolina. And they were known for having a thriving agricultural practice, and in addition to their unique ethnic identity as having European, African, and Occaneechi-Sapani lineage. And on this screen as well, you're seeing a newspaper article from a 1938 spread that was done on their community, and how the headline here says, "The Texas Negro of Indian strain township community is largely populated by them, are excellent citizens." And so I was really fortunate to have all of this additional context for my maternal side of the family. And in digging more into their story, so in digging more into their story, so this 1938 newspaper article goes on to share that, here, I've got to move some things around on my screen. So it says, and these are sort of clipped portions of that larger article. But one thing that stood out to me was this point about the fact that it says, "The majority of them are very light-skinned, often with a reddish tint of the Indian." Now, of course, this is language from back then. So it says, "And when the skin passes a definite shade, the person has lost his identity as a Texas Negro, at least." And so that stuck with me. because I'm thinking about the way that they looked. I'm thinking about how sort of exclusive their community was, just in the sense that they were really close knit. And as I was doing this research, I remembered stories that my mother told me about being a kid. So my mother was actually born and raised in Washington, D.C., but she knew she had family in North Carolina, and they always came to visit her. And she always talks about being a kid, and her and her siblings were never able to go visit them in Burlington, North Carolina. They always came to them in DC. So that stuck with me because thinking about the socio-political climate at the time, we're talking about 1800s, early 1900s. Obviously, there are implications of race, and for a group of people that appear racially ambiguous, of course, this is an added layer into that dynamic. And I also found this article from Durham, North Carolina, the Carolina Times, which was based in Durham at the time. And if you know anything about Durham's history, it had its own Black Wall Street, sort of at the turn of the century and before. And so there's this sort of slanderous bit of a newspaper article that was published in 1952 that discusses the people of this Texas community, which is where referring to my ancestors, as passing for white, and all of these things were so unexpected for me, finding them out, and but it's amazing to have. I'm just sharing part of my research methodology as a way to say that this is how I was able to build a narrative around their lives, and really sort of paint a picture of what their lives must have been like. So that's my mother's line, and I was able to kind of put a button on it there. I had connected with so many people on Ancestry. Of course, I have the photos. I have, just going back to this slide and the one before, I have photographs of their homes that were logged in the local Alamance County Historical Society. They're featured in textbooks. So I've ended up with so much information about them. So then I started to research my father's ancestry. And so you're seeing a collage here of some of the just reference information that I found about when I first started researching my father's line. And they were actually also based in the Piedmont of North Carolina. And you're seeing a photograph here of my great-grandfather holding my aunt, one of my aunts. And he actually founded two churches that I spent summers, attending when I spent the summers in Thomasville, North Carolina with my dad's side of the family. And I had no clue that my great-grandfather had founded two of these churches that I was very much a part of during the summer as a kid. So it's really impactful to do your family history research, and again, having this photograph of him and being able to see so much of my father's face in his, I'm able to then go to church records, go to census records, and really put together a narrative for his life and what his life was like. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight in my paternal ancestry is the fact that my great-grandfather worked on the Works Progress Administration. And going through the U.S. Census records, oftentimes there are abbreviations for things. And luckily, I had a really great set of educators. So I know what WPA meant when I looked at these documents and the context there. And so it really kind of puts my ancestors, it helps me put their lives into perspective of like a larger historical narrative. But what's different about my paternal ancestry research and the methodology there was that as I got further and back in time, I realized that I was no longer finding so much information about them. And so here are a list of names of my paternal ancestors who seemingly disappear into the anonymity of enslavement. They were enslaved in South Carolina, and so there's five, or actually wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 individuals here that are great grandparents of mine, that I am actually still researching years and years later after starting this. One of them is named Emmeline. She is my 4th great grandmother, and she first appears on the 1870 U.S. federal census as a citizen, as a sharecropper working on the land of a gentleman who I believe was her enslaver. And with records, when you're researching enslaved persons, oftentimes you're going to find more information about their lives through the landowner, the enslavers, their records. And so I've been able to match her age and bits of her life with, I've got a screenshot here of the slave schedule. That's what it was called. 1850 slave schedule, excuse me, of a gentleman who appears as the person whose farm she's working on when she is recorded in 1870. I also have a screenshot here of transcription work that someone did online. So there's a lot of digitized records that help out with trying to piece together the lives of enslaved ancestors who the information isn't just readily available as individuals who were not enslaved. And as you can imagine, as you can imagine doing this research, it was very emotional to have one side of my ancestry have very thriving lives, and you know, I've got photographs of their homes, I've got photographs of them, you know, dating back into the 1800s and sort of the dawn of photography itself. And then on this side, I have very, very little. So taking this information and all of what I had found, and this was, you know, years in the making, I then said, okay, well, let me do what I did for my maternal ancestry and start to look in newspaper articles and maybe textbooks, anything related to North Carolina specifically that might relate to my paternal ancestors in the same way that I found for my mom's line. So I started looking in Duke University's Hugh Mangum digitized photograph collection. So Hugh Mangum was a photographer of late 1800s, early 1900s, and he traveled in sort of this mid-Atlantic region, setting up a photo studio and taking photographs of people. So I ended up, these are not the Hugh Mangum photographs, but these are similar digitized archival photographs that I realized exist in a lot of scholarly and academic libraries. They have digital collections and they have digitized their archival photography. So this was not something I was aware of at the time. And this was all, these discoveries sort of happened in 2020, or they came to a head in 2020 for me. But what you're seeing here is a sampling of photographs from UVA, and one was found on Pinterest. One is from the Library of Congress, all digital sources. So all these photographs were found digitally. And I was so taken aback. I know it might sound naive, but having grown up and only seeing a handful of positive and non sort of like stereotypical representations of Black people from this time period, I was so shocked to find such a wealth of everyday Black folks that were photographed in this way. I had never seen this many of these types of photographs before. I didn't even know they existed. And I'm not shy to admit that because it's just the truth. I was so used to seeing sort of those like 2 or 3 Library of Congress photographs that are, you know, enslaved people in front of a you know, shack that they were living in. And so that paired with like the stereotypical like caricatures of Black folks around that time, I just wasn't familiar with these kinds of photographs. And so I said to myself, well, if I'm not familiar with these photographs, I bet there's quite a few other folks that are familiar with these photographs. So it inspired me to put them on social media. I started an Instagram project and named it Emmeline and Them, which Emmeline and Them is sort of a play on the phrase like Pookie and Them, Ray Ray and Them. It's just a phrase in Black culture that references one person and sort of a group of people. So Emmeline and Them it was, and I started posting these photographs. I started the page in April of 2020. And it really, to me, it really breathes life into these nuanced historical narratives that I wasn't familiar with and that I was sure others weren't familiar with, but narratives that also through the use of this visual history, it plainly shows a different side of Black life than what is commonly portrayed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And so I was just struck by it. And I told myself that I started it in April. I said, if I had at least 500 followers by, sorry, I'm just reading this chat here. I told myself that if I had at least 500 followers by that October, then the project would be successful. And I ended up having 11,000 followers by that June after having started it in April. And so I was like, whoa, this is so much bigger than me. And it really meant a lot to me to be able to interact with others who were having a similar experience that I was. They were unfamiliar with these photographs, didn't know they existed, and just hadn't seen such a wealth of a broad range of the Black experience from that time period. So here are 2 screenshots from the Instagram. And so it's Emmeline and them. I generally just post the photo, different versions of the photo. And I like to keep it lighthearted, and I do that on purpose. I know that a lot of times in the comments, people will call me out for idealizing, and that's fine, because I felt like with this project, I really wanted to uplift and just show a different side of history that isn't commonly shared. So as you can see in the caption here for one of the sample photos that I've put here, or screenshot, I always list the details, the historical details about the image. So this is the choir, from a photograph of the choir from the First AME Church in Los Angeles. And I just wrote, I'll meet y'all in the fellowship hall after service, LOL, swipe and zoom to get into the pride and joy on their faces. PS, this is the oldest Black church in LA, dating back to 1872. So I really like to keep it light and uplifted. And I also like to share that, as we all know, George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd that we all witnessed, and you know, at such a time as the pandemic, when we were all sort of you know, focused on media, and I think that happening, the fact that happened, and it was sort of this collective response to it, I think it created a desire for Black people in particular to see themselves represented in a different kind of way. And so I think that I can attribute some of the success of the Instagram page to that. And certainly people would comment and say, you know, this is so great to see these images at a time like this. And so I'm grateful that it created a space for people to come together and really discuss history at a time, at such a pivotal time in just the world's history, the pandemic, good Lord. So it was this project, working on this project. One day I got a DM from Nicole Hannah-Jones, and she was asking, she was telling me that she was working on the 1619 Project book. And she said, I'm wondering if we can include some of this portraiture that you curate for Instagram. And initially I was in disbelief. I'm familiar with her work, and I was so taken by her investigative reporting on the school segregation story that was award-winning, you know, several years prior to 1619. And so I was familiar with her work, and I was just like, of course, I would love to get involved. So I was brought into the 1619 Project book as the photography curator. And my task was to capture the essence of each essay through the use of archival and portraiture, or archival photography and portraiture of everyday Black Americans. But unlike my Instagram project, I was tasked with finding images from, you know, just American history across the board. So any time frame, of course, after the invention of photography. But I met with the editorial team once every few weeks, and I was tasked with selecting 3 to 5 images per essay. So if you remember any of those exact essays, there's traffic, there's healthcare, there's punishment, there's so many different, there's 17, so many different themes. And one of the main, I'll send a link for the Instagram. One of the main challenges for this entire process was copyright and licensing. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people think about, but of course, you know, we want to honor the intellectual property of the photographers, and of course, respecting the likeness of the individuals in the photographs. And I just want to actually, I'll just go back to this slide and also share one thing I forgot to mention earlier is that many of the folks in these photographs are unknown. You know, because of the time period. And when you think about your own process of collecting or taking photographs and printing them, now, of course, printed photographs is a little less popular today than it was back in the day. But if you think about the way you archive your own photographs, we don't always write our names and the date and where it was taken on the back of the photograph. So similar to these, for a lot of them, we don't know the people's names in the photographs. We don't know where they're from. We don't know where the photos were taken. And again, some of them we do, but largely we don't. And so I do like to respect their likeness. And so that's at the forefront of this work of really trying to unearth these sort of nuanced histories. And I'll also share that throughout the process of selecting photographs, it wasn't just copyright that was a challenge. We had to go back to the drawing board on several of these photographs because some of the photographers, the living photographers who had taken the photos, they did not want to be involved in the project, which was great to know because, of course, we wouldn't want to include a photograph from someone who had sort of interesting perspectives about the 1619 project in and of itself. So that was another plot point with the photo selection. So I am going to pause there before we get into this this portion of reviewing the photos together. If anyone had any questions, oh, I see that you put the Instagram in the chat, but if anyone had any quick questions about genealogy or anything that I've shown in the previous slides, I just kind of wanted to open it up and answer those if you want to put those in the chat before I invite the audience to respond to some of a set of slides of photographs. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I'll hold for questions at the end as well. So feel free to hang on to them. Let's see, I've got to go back. Let's see. Okay, for right now, I'm going to continue. I believe there are a few questions, but I'll come back to them. So I want to invite everyone looking, oh, okay, wait, actually, sorry, a question did come through, so I'm going to answer this one. Yes, I was able to begin my maternal research with just 3 pieces of information. And I will add that one of the fortunate things about my research process for my maternal ancestors is that they all had very unique names, which, as you can imagine, lended itself to doing that research. So Exodus Martin is the name of my second great-grandfather. There are not that many Exodus Martins in existence in the late 1800s, and so it was easy by their names. It was really easy to pair the records there. I'll also add that, you know, genealogy research is a lot of math. It's a lot of like confirming of dates, confirming of places. There are a lot of people with similar names throughout history, you know, so if your ancestors have names like John Smith, for example, it's going to be harder. And it's just a matter of pulling information from multiple sources. Let's see. Yeah, so I will wait until the end to answer some of these questions about finding archival photos. And I wanted to start with this photo here of this young girl. She's standing next to a radio, and she's dressed to the nines. You know, she's got jewelry. And I just wanted to ask the audience what you're seeing about this photograph and what themes you might be getting from viewing this photograph. So I'll just sort of pause for a second there. It's Ruby Washington, Greenville, Mississippi, mid-20th century by Henry Clay Anderson. So what is sort of coming to mind as you look at this photo? You know, we're seeing photographs in the background. We're seeing this beautiful lamp. This looks like someone's home. Yeah, daughter next to dad's photos. Just came home from church. Exactly. She looks like she's dressed to the nine. The radio and her delight about the music. Exactly. Exactly. Hope, longing, reflection. Yes. Great deal of pride and family. She's a part of a lineage of yes. Yes. She has big dreams. Yes. Okay. Breaks a really stereotype. Let's see. Or yes, it does. It breaks stereotypes. Because yes, you can see the wealth that this family has just based on how she's dressed, jewelry, her little watch there. I think her nails are painted. So this is actually the photograph that I curated. Pride. Yes. This is the photograph that I curated for the music essay. And if you read the 1619 book, that essay discusses how Black artists are able to find freedom in music. And to me, after I read the essay, I thought about how intimate, how intimately we experience music. Oftentimes we're wearing headphones or we're in a smaller space. I mean, also, well, people experience music in all kinds of ways, but commonly we're in our home, we're in, you know, whatever kind of smaller space listening to music. And so for me, this photograph, she's staying, obviously the radio is a pretty direct representation of that. But to me, freedom of being in your home and just looking at the way she's dressed, looking at the pride that they have, like everyone said, with their family photographs, it really captured what the essay made me feel after reading it. Sort of this idea of Black freedom through music and how liberating it is to create music, to listen to music, and kind of be in that, you know, transported into a different space and time through music. So this was my sort of curatorial process for that. Political involvement, patriotism, yes, yeah, all of these things. So the next photo we're looking at here is Trini and Halim, Lower East Side, 2000. It's titled Old School Love by Jamel Shabazz. So if people want to respond to this photograph in the comments, in the comment section, what themes are you seeing in this photo? It's a couple here. They're dressed in black and leather. What does that say? She's got this sort of smirk on her face, or like a smirk, kind of a smile. Excuse me. He's wearing this hat to the side. He's clearly got style. They both have style. But also look at the setting. They're on a playground. She's on a swing. It looks like he might be about to push her on the swing, and that's when the photographer caught them. On a date, vibes, yes, all of these things. Young love, shared human experiences, free young love, yes. Intimacy, all of these things. They are in the shape of a heart. Wow, I never saw that. They are in the shape of a heart. Someone said comfort, yes. Black love. So I gleaned all of these things from this photograph, and I actually paired this with the essay on fear. And that's an interesting interpretation, just offhand hearing it. But if you remember the essay that was written about fear, and it really discussed the perception and how Black people are perceived in society. And so I liked this photograph because even though there are these indicators of historical, like larger historical narratives, so the Black leather to me always makes me think of like Black Panthers and you know, the Black Power movement. But having that bit of reference in this photograph, to me, paired with her facial expression, paired with the fact that they're in a park, they're clearly at leisure, they're clearly enjoying themselves. She has this, you know, kind of smile, like, you know, so in response to the essay, she's got this smile that's sort of like, what are you so afraid of, you know? And I felt like after reading the essay and I found this photograph, I was like, wow, you know, it really is sort of like this beautiful response to the themes in the essay. Perception, how do you perceive these two? They're in a park enjoying each other, innocent love, but of course, what are the you know, what are the racial implications of this photograph? Are there any? And in the scope of this essay, it's sort of an ironic response to how Black people might be perceived in a park enjoying themselves, as of course we see in news headlines, you know, and whatnot. So this was my curated photograph for the fear essay. So moving along, and I'll move through these a little quickly. This gentleman's name is William Headley. He escaped from enslavement near Raleigh, North Carolina, and this photograph is in the Library of Congress archives. And looking at this photo, I was struck by a number of things. I was struck by how tall and poised his posture is. Yes, his shoulders are back. He's standing tall, exactly. You know, looking closer into the photograph, I know you might not be able to see it on this screen, but his eyes are so, they're so pure and they're so, it's almost like, I can't even find the words. You just have to look at the photograph. But it sort of tells a narrative in itself. You know, he looks confident. Yes, he is free. He's determined. There's pride. He's, yes, claiming himself. The way his hands are being held, regardless of his clothes. You know, he found himself. My first reaction to this photograph was the fact that this gentleman escaped from enslavement and found himself in a photo studio. I don't know the details of how he got there. You know, many of these photo studios were kind of like pop-ups in a way. They only cost a few cents to get a photo taken like this. And I believe this is a cabinet card photo, which the actual size of it is quite small. They were usually like about this big. Strength, at peace, joy at his freedom. Yes. Does not take away from the deeper meaning. Yes. So his clothing and how he's presented here tells such a larger story about his life, and I can only imagine what his life must have been like. But I've actually paired this photograph with the essay on punishment, which looks at our carceral state in America and how and the origins of mass incarceration. So the origins of mass incarceration are enslavement. And so what does it mean to pair this photograph of this, you know, formerly enslaved man who is now free? He's found his own freedom. And his clothing is clearly tattered and torn, which is indicative of what he's been through. But through it all, yes, I am a man. Through it all, here he is. And he found himself in a photo studio, you know, the pride of his identity. He wanted to represent himself in this way. And so, or he wanted to capture his likeness in that moment and represent himself in spite of what he had been through. So to me, this poetically captured the themes of that particular essay. I'm just keeping track of time here. So here we have Thomas Cobb, Brooklyn, New York, 1990s by Eli Reed. What are you getting from this photograph? This young man, young kid, you know, he's embracing clearly older hands, you know, of an adult. It looks like a woman based on the sort of feminine quality of the watch, maybe, and the sort of kind of the edges of this black sort of sweater or cardigan they have. So it seems like they might be a maternal figure to him, guardianship. Yes, anything is, oh, that's from the other one, but I am loved. Yes, love, protected. He feels safe, empowered, support. Yes, all of these things. And so for me, for this essay, he is loved, protected, and proud. Yes. For me, I paired this photograph with the essay on citizenship, because secure and love, yes, because it sort of portrays a sense of belonging. He belongs. He belongs with, you know, whoever is behind him in this picture. But it's also like, you know, the act of like hugging yourself, embracing your own shoulders. You're sort of grounding yourself. You're saying that you belong. And reading that citizenship essay, some of the themes that came out of that were this idea of being an American citizen as a Black person, but do you have that feeling of belonging in a country that you're oppressed in, you know? So the idea of that to me was captured in this photograph. You know, he belongs, he looks confident, he looks safe, he looks secure and loved, proud, and yeah. This next one, two young women holding hands or embracing, 1890, Beinecke Library, Yale University. What are you gleaning from this photograph? Two young women, they both, they look different hair, different skin tones. Their faces kind of resemble one another. One's wearing a darker color dress, one's wearing a lighter colored dress. Safety, sisterhood. Gorman's twin. Yes, actually, I never thought about that. Amanda Gorman's twin. She does look a lot like her. Girlfriends. The beauty of friendship. Yes. And again, we don't know their relationship dynamic. So it's left to our own imagination. We don't have those details for the sitters in the photograph, but is this a mother-daughter? Is this a sister relationship? Are these girlfriends? Are they lovers? Are they cousins? Are they, you know, does one of them work for the other? Who knows? We don't have that information. And so I actually paired different but the same. Yes. I actually paired this photograph with the essay on race. If you remember from that essay, it discusses the construction of race and being sort of hinged on or defined by the status of someone's mother. So back in the 1800s and during enslavement in America, the child was deemed whatever race the mother. So if the mother was enslaved, the child was going to be enslaved or deemed enslaved. If the mother was Black, the child was then Black. And so looking at this, perhaps in mourning, yes, possibly. So looking at this photograph, thinking about the construction of race, they look like they could be related, but they also look very different. And so when we think about race, we think about Black Americans. You could be, yes, you could identify as Black, but you could also look very different than another Black person sitting next to you. And how does that, how do those, you know, what are the implications on your, the experience that you have as a Black person based on what you look like? And so I kind of wanted to capture that. And I feel like this photograph does that in a good way. Even thinking about my own genealogy, I don't look like my maternal ancestors, but that's who I come from, you know? And so I think this essay does a good job at looking at sort of the category of race and how ethnicity is different from that and all of the things. So moving right along, I think we running up on time here, but this photograph, very quickly, what are you getting from this? The father looks proud, the daughter looks sort of frustrated and kind of not wanting to take the photo. She's being embraced by her father. The young boy looks a little apprehensive, he looks shy. Yes, we're getting protection. What else are you getting from the photograph? So this is Chris Williams and his children, Harley and Hunter, in Silver Spring, Maryland, taken in 2020. By Michael A. McCoy. And family love, yes. Dad is our provider, yes. So interestingly, I actually paired this photo with the essay on progress. If you remember that essay, it discusses how do we measure progress? What does progress look like? And what does it mean to have progressed? And it was, you know, looking at that through the lens of Barack Obama's presidency. And so to me, this photo captures the different approaches to how progress is defined. The father looks very proud. Again, the daughter looks frustrated, or like, you know, she's just kind of like over it. And the son looks kind of shy and apprehensive. And so to me, this could be every interpretation of progress. What, you know, progress to the father, you know, the look on his face is very different than how progress might be perceived from someone else. And that kind of captures the different children's responses. And then the last photo we'll look at, it's called Lean. This gentleman here who's on this bike, his name is Lean. This was taken in Atlanta in 2018 by Jorge Segala. And what are you getting from this photograph? Fun and free. Joy, yes, he's got on headphones. He's in the middle of the street. He's on a bike. He's doing a trick. He's an athlete. He's very skilled to be able to do that. You know, there's others in this, you know, in the street with him that he's riding with. So I paired this photograph, Defiance, yes. I paired this photograph with the essay on traffic. And that one looks at the ways in which Black neighborhoods were carved up by the creation of certain highways. And where I'm from, Durham, North Carolina, that was definitely the case. And so I wanted to kind of subvert all of that with the use of this photo in a way. If you've ever seen the sort of documentary called 12 O'Clock Boys, it's about motorbike culture in Baltimore, which is common in a lot of cities throughout America, inner cities in America. And basically, it's this idea that in that documentary, you know, they discuss the fact that the cops can't actively chase kids or young people or anybody on a bike. It's a safety issue. And so there's this little pocket of freedom that they find when they're riding because they can't get chased. And so they're sort of living out this the freedom of their actions without necessarily having to get in trouble for it. I think riding these motorbikes might be illegal in certain cities. I don't know the details of that, but this kind of poetically, this, you know, explained the or represented the traffic essay for me. So I'm going to pause there and let's see. I will stop sharing my screen. I did have some information up there, but I think someone already put the Instagram in the chat, and it's yeah. So if anyone had any questions, let me see if I can find my document with the questions, because I believe there are.
Yeah, I think the main ones, which you did kind of talk throughout, but I guess could be good to end with a summary, were just around like any guidance you have on where to find such images, you know, if there's specific, you know, resources, websites, you know, museums you're going to, where are you finding the pictures?
Yeah, so initially everything was digital. You know, I started this project in 2020, and I was researching scholarly archives. So Yale University Library, Harvard's University Library. I mean, almost every university has a digital collection nowadays. So if you go to the library site for a lot of colleges and universities, they have digital collections where they have basically taken photographs of their archives. And they're usually high resolution. They're usually free to download, free to access. And so that's where I found them. A lot of even public libraries have archival collections. So if you go to a public library website, they might have what's called special collections. And usually they have photography collections in their special collections. And so that's really where, like, that's kind of an initial place to start finding these photographs. The funny thing is, as I get contacted by people and get DMs from people who follow the Instagram project, I know some folks who work for like a historical society. They also might have digitized photographs, but someone reached out to me who works for a historical society who said that they actually find boxes of photographs in abandoned homes sometimes. So like the attic of an abandoned home, people will find photographs, maybe if they just recently bought a house and there's an attic, and they'll say, oh my gosh, there's this box of photos from like more than 100 years ago, and they donate it to their local historical society or college, or, you know, an institution that can preserve those materials. Obviously, for more prominent families who have had this history in their family and they've preserved the photographs, they will have a university or an institution acquire their photographs. And it's similar to what museum collections have, what certain, historical societies. I mean, starting there is really like a free resource online to find these kinds of photographs. There's also antique shops. If you want to see them in person, if you want to find these photographs in person, going to, yard sales. I live in New York City, and thankfully there haven't been too many sirens during the talk, but I often see people selling things on the street, and sometimes I see like a tintype or a daguerreotype that someone's selling in a street fair. So it really is, the images can come from all over. Yes, Library of Congress has a great digital collection that you can go to. And let me see, I will share my email address, the Instagram handle, and the website. I think I shared that with everyone, so you guys have that. If you want to reach out, please do. If you have questions about genealogy, I'm more than happy to answer them. As you can see, I had a very unique experience with researching my family history, and I had no clue that half of this information existed for my ancestors. And I always like to tell people, you really never know what you're going to find, even if you think you know a lot about your family, even like as I did, and I had no clue that this was my ancestry. So I really encourage everyone. And I'll also just add that ancestry.com is a subscription service that you do have to pay for. There is a free family tree mapping service, and it's called familysearch.org. And they both get their records from sort of the same source. So it's just that ancestry.com is a little bit more user-friendly, but you have to pay for that service. So if you want a free service for doing your ancestry, familysearch.org is a good one.
Well, thank you so much. There's so many like affirming comments in the chat about how much people enjoyed the session. Thank you to everyone who participated. Our next panel starts in just 10 minutes at 1 p.m. and that is about teaching strategies for engaging immigrant students with 1619. So we hope to see you there. And thank you again, Kimberly.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.